The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to another great webinar from CPA Academy. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Autumn and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar on Diversity and Inclusion One-on-One. We are not uncomfortable enough. Our presenters today are Jina Etienne and Eric Pierre. Before we get started, I wanted to go through some housekeeping items and do some technical checks to make sure everything is working. First, if y'all don't mind going to the GoToWebinar Questions tab on your control panel and let me know that you can hear my voice and see the title slide. Feel free to also let us know where you're chiming in from. I always enjoy seeing that. It makes me feel connected to y'all. And if anyone has any technical issues, please let me know in that Questions tab. I'll do my best to get around to you as quickly as I can. This is also where you can put your questions and comments for the presenter. All right, let me check my other monitor here. Who do we have today? I see Randy in Fort Worth, Texas. Oregon, welcome, welcome. Austin, San Diego. We got a bunch of Texans here. Hello. Illinois, Alabama. All right. Ralph says I'm good. Okay. Now that I know that everything is working, let's go through the housekeeping. This is a 1 CPE credit webinar. The way you earn that credit is fairly straightforward. Just stay logged in for 50 minutes and answer the poll questions. We'll have 4 polls, and to earn full credit, you will need to answer at least 3 of them. Now, if you're on a mobile device, you might need to click your answer a few times and scroll down to find that submit button. And if you have to log out and log back in for any reason, our system will keep track of your time. I wanted to let you know that we are recording today's webinar, and the archive, along with your CPE credit, will be available in your CPA Academy account within 24 hours. We also recommend that you download today's presentation materials, which can be found in the control panel's Handouts tab. Now that we're all set, let's welcome our presenters. Jina, the floor is all yours.
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. And I noticed we have some folks from Annapolis, Maryland, and I'm in Silver Springs, so some of my local peeps here, as well as some folks from Austin. And Eric is joining us today. So Eric, jump on. I don't want to be the only one. Hey, there you are. Thank you. So welcome, Eric. Today on our D&I one-on-one, I have the honor of speaking with Eric Pierre. So Eric is a CPA, and he's in Austin, Texas, where apparently some of your folks are that are joining us today. He became a CPA back in 2006, and then he spent a year playing professional basketball for the San Diego Guardians. So you just go to prove, Eric, that all of us CPAs aren't just, boring accountants. Today he runs a successful firm and specializing in compliance, advanced planning, forensic accounting, and advisory services. Interesting, but Eric and I never met in person. We met and connected over tax Twitter. And although we agree on the issues, we haven't always agreed about how we should be talking about them. And so that's why I was so excited that he would join me today. But more on that in a minute. So Eric, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And I look forward to this webinar and to my friends in Austin.
So before we jump in to the main discussion, I always like to start by asking the question, why is this important to you? We were talking about how the conversations we're having around D&I and diversity they feel safe to you. So why is this important? Then we talk about being more uncomfortable.
Wow, I could say a lot, but I think the one thing I would say is that, every day when I step out of my home, I'm disrespected at some level. And I guess an example is, I'm 6'8", I'm a large guy. And whenever I go in a room in a suit, in particular if it's, in our industry, most people assume I'm the driver or security and not somebody that runs a multi-state practice with 10 people in it. So that's something that, and the numbers bear out would say that I'm not a CPA, and less than 1% of us have a CPA license. And sorry about that, my Apple Watch is going off for some reason. So let me take it off so I don't have that issue again. My apologies, ladies and gentlemen. And it's important to me. I'm a black man in America. I'm a second generation black CPA. It's also important because I want to see other people that look like me in this field. I think this industry is an incredible industry, and I think people in the group would actually do well, but a lot of people don't want to be in it because of the things that have gone on daily in our industry.
No, that is fair. You were talking about less than 1% of us, the CPAs and partners. What is it? 0.3%, I think.
Well, actually, yeah, CPA updated, it's 1%. And here's what's sad. My odds of making the NBA or NFL are better than making partner in a CPA firm in this country right now. And I've told people this, and I probably will still say it. You know, if I have a son and, you know, it doesn't get better, I may say, hey, your odds are better going playing pro ball than do this. If I had known those odds when I was in college, I would have done that tryout in Europe instead of going to Deloitte and not dealt with what I dealt with at Deloitte in the rest of my career, just to be completely honest.
That's a fair point. So the conversation we're going to have today, and when Eric and I were talking about this in advance, I've encouraged Eric to say what he thinks, however he wants. We approach this whole conversation a little bit differently because I like to be on the safer side and you like to just put it out there. So before we do that, I just want to lay a couple of ground rules. And so when it comes to difficult conversations, so some of these slides are the slides that I use when I'm presenting with clients, and I thought they would be good to share here. First of all, when we talk about this in the context of our profession, a lot of the reasons we don't talk about it are the things you see here. It's not my problem. We don't do this at work. I'm too busy. And I love this quote because part of what people have to be willing to do is be okay with being uncomfortable. Because we know a lot of people, they'll do anything to avoid being uncomfortable. But being willing to be uncomfortable actually makes it less uncomfortable. And that sounds counterintuitive, but it's the psychology tells us. I also found this article, and by the way, everyone, on the slide that you saw with Eric's information, along the bottom are clickable links if you want to be able to jump onto his Twitter, your fave CPA. You want to jump on to reach out to him on LinkedIn and so on his website. This article, if you click on the header of this article in the PDF, you'll be able to go read the full article. But here, what I loved about it is disagreements can feel like a threat. And when we start talking about race, it can really feel threatening. And what you have down here at the bottom is the conversation can get derailed and then the conflict just gets worse. And so two things. One is, if you've not read this book, I would recommend everybody grab it because part of the reason we can't have these conversations is that we don't have permission. You know, like if Eric, I'm giving you permission to throw it at me, then I'm ready to have the dialogue. But if it just comes out of the blue, I might be defensive. And so that's important for people to recognize. The other thing here is this book, it's a great book, and there's so many, but this is one, Blind Spot. A lot of people don't know that they don't know something. So the minute you bring it up, it's almost, they're going to double down and be defensive or reactive. It's important to know. And then the last thing I want to share is I would encourage everybody to watch this TED Talk. Because what she talks about, it's called The Danger of a Single Story. And what she talks about is it's not that there aren't components of the stereotype that are not true. They are just one part of the story. And she goes on to say, and I quote, the consequence of the single story is this. It robs people of dignity. It makes our recognition of our equal humanity difficult. It's exactly what you were saying, Eric, about they see you as a black man and a big black guy, and therefore fill in the blank based on the stereotype.
Yeah.
And then the only other thing I'll say, this is for Eric and I, even though we already agreed to this, but certainly for those of you, please ask a question as we go along. If you have a comment, you can use the Q&A. I would just ask everyone to make this space safe enough for Eric to say what he needs to say, for me to say what I want to say with recognizing that we do not intend to harm. We are trying to inform and engage. So if that's all fair, then Eric, let's talk about why. Because I remember there was an exchange you and I had on Twitter where I posted something and then you came back and said, what are you trying to call me out for? And I'm like, I'm not trying to call you out. And I mean, so, let's talk about that. If you and I are going to debate how we talk about this, then how can we talk about this?
Well, yeah, because you said, I remember that particular exchange. It's like, well, Eric, I've had 20 years experience. I know you have a lot of experience because someone wanted, try to push I'm not a D&I expert, so I tagged Dina. It's like, and I was thinking, hey, I said you're the truth. I mean, maybe I should say Jina is the truth, you know?
I was
The
being
John the
defensive, in other
Baptist. Yeah, you know, I should have called you the truth and John the Baptist. You know, I don't know. And so, and also sometimes some discussions shouldn't be had on Twitter because when you read something on a screen,
Yep.
like last night I had to read a message from a client that said that I'm unhappy with prompt responses. And I was, I said some words I'm not going to say here. I was swearing a lot. Because we respond to this client all the time. And so I was like, what is that about?
So when you think about how we should be having these conversations, and we call this, we're not uncomfortable enough. What does that mean? We're not uncomfortable enough.
Whew. Well, I guess I'm going to say what it means to me. You know, I'm not the unofficial spokesperson of every Black American. But I'll say that it's understood that from growing up, you know, and I grew up, by the way, I grew up in a well-to-do white neighborhood, Katy, Texas. My family was the one prestigious country club in Houston. My family was the first Black family they let in. So I know when I'm talking about what I'm saying. I didn't grow up in the hood. But if, you know, for someone like me to be in this industry and be in certain circles, it's assumed basically that we have to make my Caucasian counterparts feel good about themselves and their ignorance and their bigotry and their cognitive dissonance, and that you're not supposed to go direct. And especially, you know, me being 6'8", you know, my dad's taller than me, and in his career, his white boss told him, it was around the time I was born, saying, Les, you're 6'8", you don't have to do anything else to be noticed. So I was basically raised for most of my life to be seen and not heard. But then social media changed that for me. And being in business for myself, because if I was still working for an employer, I probably would not say some of the things I would say because I could be at risk of being fired.
So how much bolder do you think our conversations need to be? Do we need to be able to talk specifically about race, or do you think we need to just keep it at the, you know, we've all heard the conversation. We refer to minorities as diverse people, and we've stopped calling people Black, Native American.
Right.
We sort of put us all into this umbrella of diverse people, and now we're talking about us as a group. How do you think we need to have more direct conversations so we can finally make progress on some of these issues?
I think we should be, you know, very direct. I mean, when we talk about sexual harassment, that conversation is very direct because that's the only way for men to understand that. And also women, we've seen instances of women the last few years acting appropriately, whether it's, you know, sexual harassment, fraud. I do forensic audit. We're very direct about that. And then it seems like when we talk about other people groups, like for instance, you know, recently we see a rise of hatred against Asians. People are seeming more receptive of that. And I think part of it is that Asians are viewed as more intelligent and more well-to-do than Black people. And there's even they've gotten laws passed where, like, if you assault an Asian person, I don't know if they signed a bill yet, so forgive me. You know, I know there was a bill to where basically if you're harassing an Asian person, that it could be a federal crime. There's no such thing for Black people. And, you know, my parents are not from this country, but what we do know is that Black people are considered the lowest of lowest. Americans even treat Black immigrants from places like Haiti better than Black Americans, which we don't understand.
You know, the whole thing about Asian hate is there's something called the myth of the model minority. And so Asians generically, so all Asian, we call it Pan-Asian, so all the different Asian countries fall into this trap of, like you said, they're the good minorities. They behave, they're compliant, they've assimilated well. We in this country, though, there's a dark history when it comes to race from a Black and white perspective. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about when you say you were raised to be seen, not heard. that we don't talk about the issue specifically. And I know some of the conversations I've seen you thrown out there on Twitter. And yes, by the way, people, there is a tax Twitter. Just go to Twitter and look up the hashtag tax Twitter. You'll find all of us there. But you've thrown some things out there specifically about race. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Ooh, I've said so much that I don't remember, so you may have to jog my memory. But I'm not afraid of talking about it because nobody else will. I know for a fact that when people meet me in person, and I'm not described as CPA. I'm always described as the Black CPA. Now, I'm not offended that you call me Black, but my white counterparts, we don't call. I'm just saying this guy's name not to cause strife. Like Brian Streg, he's here in Austin. He's not referred to as a white CPA. He's just known as CPA. But when I'm described as a Black CPA. And we know from the dark history that Black has a negative connotation. And that's the kind of things that I speak about. I know that when I step in an elevator dressed up like this or even better, a white lady will stand in the corner of the elevator and assume that I'm an assaulter, even though statistics say it's actually white male more likely to assault her sexually than me.
So it's interesting because I'm watching some of the comments coming in, and thank you all.
Okay, I can't see them.
I'll share you.
Okay.
And then the only thing I would ask folks is when you make a comment, somebody said, for example, but not white with the smiley face. I don't know what that's in response to. So if you could throw in the full context, that would be so helpful. But somebody said your bias is coming out. Somebody said there's only the human race. And let me share my reaction to that, and I'll ask you to react. Is it bias when your experience your whole life has been one where you've had to swallow who you are, you've had to hide who you are, and the minute you get to speak to those experiences, somebody says you're biased? And then the other one is that the human race, that is an idealized statement, and I believe we are all one human race. Unfortunately,
Absolutely.
history, systems, practices tell us that that is not the case. And there's an entire history of literature that you can read about colorism and the evolution of colorism around the world. The United States we're not the only ones who do this, right? So how would you react to those questions? Oh, right, polling questions. Sorry. Let's do a polling question.
Sure,
thank you, the person who said that. Can we launch the first one, Autumn?
Sure, here is poll number 1 out of 4. As a reminder, we'll have 4 polls during the presentation, and you need to answer at least 3 of them to earn your CPE credit. Your first polling question is, how would you describe your comfort level with sensitive topics?
So there are some people somebody said you're making generalizations about Americans and white people that are not 100% true. And to be clear, we're not saying anything that we say is 100% true. Nothing is true about everyone. If we go back to the TED Talk, what a stereotype does is it tells you something about someone, but not everything. And so I just want to address those. Let's see.
Sure, I'm going to close this poll down, and I will share those results with everyone.
Yeah, I'm looking.
And can you see those results?
Yes.
Where do I see them?
I'll go ahead and read it. So the leading was 41% was somewhat uncomfortable, 32% said comfortable, 14% very comfortable, and 8% and 5% very uncomfortable or not sure.
Thank you. So we have almost half saying they're very or somewhat uncomfortable. That's not surprising because, I'm willing to have these conversations, but it doesn't mean at some point I'm not uncomfortable along the way.
Yeah.
So, your bias is showing, but there's only one human race. What were your reactions as I said that? Did it trigger you in any way?
No, I was actually laughing. We all have biases. Yeah, I'm biased. For instance, I'm a Nike guy.
Did you just take off your shoe?
Yes, I did. I did. Listen, I play basketball. I prefer Nike. Now, I don't actually run in this shoe. When I run in, I forgot the name of the brand. I'm biased against Nike when it comes to running shoes, but when it comes to basketball and leisure, I'm biased about Nike. I prefer pastel colors than dark colors. Everybody's biased, but when I speak about my experiences, some of them there's actually statistics that back it up. I can understand also you say that because, I don't know who said it, but, I will be biased hearing about women's situation because I can't give birth to children. So I can't relate to that. I don't know what it's like to have to worry about being sexually harassed on a daily basis. I don't have to deal with that. So it is what it is on that. In the human race, yeah, we are part of the human race. I know that biologically our cells are not that much different. However, our world has been divided based on race and economics, and this country is not unique to that. So, I'm not offended. I've heard a lot worse. Listen, I grew up in Katy, Texas, hearing the N-word a lot so much. What people are saying today is nothing.
That's fair. What I would encourage other people to do is there's a YouTube, you can find this on YouTube, and it's a series that Oprah Winfrey did on colorism, dark girls, light girls. And it talks about how even within the African American community, there are subcultures around different shades of Black. So it's not like we have a lockdown on, as a group, being offended about being Black when we speak to people who are white. This is such a nuanced and complex issue. And that's partly why this is hard to talk about. Even you and I talking about this, and then people reacting through the chat on behalf of maybe being offended because we're not covering everybody or saying everything. I mean, at some point, I feel like the political correctness has to stop.
Yeah.
There's a difference between being politically correct and having a thoughtful yet provocative conversation.
Right.
How far are you willing to go, though? Would you actually, I was going to say, would you, if you felt like somebody was being not just insensitive or thoughtless, or I'll just say, if you thought somebody was being racist, would you call them out on that, or would you try to come about it a different way?
No, I've called people racist. I mean, if you see my Twitter, there's a well-known CPA. He wrote a racist comment to me. And the funny thing is like, I posted a comment. I don't want to say the guy's name because I don't want people flaming the guy like that. That's a little out of bounds to me. But if you follow your favorite CPA, you can find it. This was about 6-8 weeks ago. I had posted in accounting firm influencers. I posted a meme that said stop AAPI hate. That's actually what I said. I posted a meme, because if I'm going to speak out about Black suffrage, I should speak up for other groups. And I also want to clarify, for those of you that say I'm biased and or a hypocrite and I won't speak out for others, my corporate career ended because I spoke out for an Indian colleague who was racially abused. That's why I don't work in corporate America anymore. I got fired for doing that. So I actually spoke up for somebody else. When most people in this room are not willing to speak out, I know people who see things that are wrong every day, including Black people, and too afraid of losing money. I actually did, and I paid a heavy price, but I'm thankful because my life is better today. So I want to clarify that by saying when I speak about it, I do live it out every day. I've also fired Black clients for saying inappropriate things about white people. I don't post every good deed I do because I don't. It's supposed to be a daily thing. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm not afraid of calling people racist, but yeah, I spoke up for the Asian hate because I just think it's irrational to just beat up Asian people for no reason. And a guy writes back, the CPA says, "Oh, you Black people X, Y, Z." It's like, whoa. That's the first one. I'm not even talking about Black people. Second, you don't know who I am and what I do for the Black community. I mentor Black CPAs. I'm part of National Society Black CPAs. I've hired African Americans to help them with their business. I work with other races. If you go to my firm webpage, we have a very diverse team. I work with anybody. And this guy, we didn't even talk about Black people, and the guy came at me talking about African Americans. That's why I call him racist. That had nothing to do with that subject, and he attacked me about that when I said stop API hate. And I said, hey guys, we should be aware because some of us probably have an Asian client or two, and just like Black people don't like seeing a George Floyd video, some of these things they're seeing are gonna make them uncomfortable. So be aware and be open of what's going on around you. That's all I said. It wasn't even about African Americans, and I got attacked for that.
Well, so I could say, what time is it? I want to make sure we get the polls. We got a few more minutes. I could say here, listening to you, there were a couple things that you said that I guess I had a reaction to. Like, for example, one of the things that you said, you made it sound like everybody else does something. And I was thinking to myself, God, I should have written it down when you said it because it was a very specific comment. But I thought it's unfair for you to generalize about other people if you get frustrated when other people are generalizing about you. And so, I don't know, I agree with you about that. You said you would be willing to call somebody a racist. I can't say that I would be willing to do the same. And I say that because I feel like if I called somebody a racist, it would be the end of the conversation. And I want to continue the conversation. And I think you see it differently, where sometimes you just got to call it what it is. And you're okay with that.
Well, and part of it is I'm also a pro athlete. We're used to being very direct on the court.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, so that competitive side of me, I'm willing to call things out for what it is. You know, I used to be able to say, hey, you can't guard me, and I'm going off for 40.
Mm-hmm.
And it may hurt their feelings, but it's true.
Right. Some of that is also personality, don't you think? I mean, I tend to be, I've been told over the course of my career that perhaps I'm too direct. And but that is a personality thing. We also know some people are introverts and they need to think about something before they'll say something. And they might, in a dialogue, let's say we're having one of these really uncomfortable conversations, something comes up, they might seem like they're retreating when really they just need a moment to think about it.
Mm.
So I don't know. By the way, this Blake, we're getting lots and lots and lots of questions and comments. Shockingly not shocked. So let me see. And
Autumn is for laughing. I'm taking this very seriously, by the way.
Say that again.
I'm laughing, but I am taking it seriously because of your comment. I'm not shocked, and I'm looking forward to hearing these questions. I'm sure I'm going to get some interesting heat.
So there's some of these are more comments than questions. Somebody's referring to the camps that we put Asians in California. There's some really dark history there. I would encourage people to go look at that. Somebody else,
camps.
Yeah. Somebody World War II. I mean, it was not pretty. Does Eric ever call out microaggressions? And does the statement Black CPA come just from non-people of color? Or in other words, does everybody say Black CPA? What's a fair question?
You know, it's a fair question. It comes from everybody because, you know, we get Black business owners contacting us, you know, through the website, and I'll call them and say, why are you contacting us? That's always one of the first questions I ask. And someone said, we want to work with a Black CPA. So I'm actually not offended being called a Black CPA because I'm Black and a CPA. I'm not offended being called Black, but everybody says it. For Black people, from the ones we've dealt with, they're surprised to find one because there's so few of us. You can go to, you know, so there's 2 Black CPAs in the house where I grew up. You can go to major cities and not find even one Black CPA that's an independent practitioner. So some of it is just an aura, some of it's a unicorn thing, and some of it's just people don't know better than to say that. I mean, my own people call me a Black CPA. So
somebody said, if you saw me, you would think I'm white, but I'm not. And I think that I appreciate you raising that point. To that, though, I would say there are Black people who you might think are white, but they're not. And so this isn't a question of whether the white person or the person we perceive as white is white. I think the conversation we're having is about the person who is visibly not white and the treatment of those people who are people of color. Because if you are a person of color, you are a minority. And regardless of what you actually are, those visible differences are the first things people see and think about.
I agree. You know, I have Latin women that work for me. They look white, and you know, but I've had to cut off clients for them. One of them does not look so white, but one of them does. And the one that looks white, people talk to her differently than her cousin who's a little darker. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she's quick to stand up for that stuff, and we've had to fire clients for people mistreating her?
When I was in college, I worked in a apartment complex. I was the assistant manager. So one of my jobs was to send people notices that they haven't paid their rent and that we're going to kick them out. And I remember one time I had a resident come in and I came from the back and I came up front. I'm like, hi, can I help you? And they said, yeah, well, my maiden name was Myers. So they're like, we're here to see Miss Myers. And I said, that's me. And you could see on their face oh, that's you. And I mean, talk about microaggression that person talked about. They weren't expecting to see a young Black woman as the person calling them. And you know, you've had that experience. You know when somebody is surprised by who you are. Or the one time when I was at the beach and this woman asked me, are you a reporter? And I said, no, why? She said, well, you're so articulate.
Yeah.
And, you know, those are the examples of microaggressions. I can't imagine the ones that you've had to deal with.
Yeah, I've had to deal, but to be fair, I've also been guilty of that. You know, for instance, I used to work with a Jewish female attorney, and when I heard her on the phone, she sounded like an old lady. And then I met her in person. She was my age. I was like, whoa. You know, or some of my Caucasian brothers and sisters that grew up around people like us, they have this, you know, the stereotypical accent. And you're thinking, okay, this is a minority, you see a person Caucasian like.
Yeah. Well, you know, thank you for saying that, because what you're sharing there is there's more to you than just the first part of this conversation, and that all of us have to work through this. It's not just, you're not sitting there pointing the finger at, okay, all you white people, you need to get fixed and fix yourself. This is a collective issue that we all have to work on.
Remember, I said I was biased. I was very upfront. Yeah,
right. We don't need to keep seeing your shoes, Eric, but thank you. You trying to sell something? You trying to sell Nike? What's going on? We do not have sponsors.
They don't pay me, unfortunately. I wish I had if you could give me a contract with them, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. But you know what? We've been talking about something here. I want to open, Autumn, if we could, that second poll, because I want to talk about the results.
Sure. Poll number 2 is open. Go ahead and cast your vote. This one is, of the topics below, which is the most difficult for you to talk about? Race, cultural background, gender, age, or not sure? Prefer not to answer.
I'm looking while they're answering. I see somebody that said they voted somewhat uncomfortable because they were afraid to offend someone. That is exactly why we need to be comfortable having uncomfortable conversations. And to that person, I would say, it's okay to say, I'm afraid to say something because I might make you uncomfortable and I don't know how to say this. I think if you, depending on who it is, I mean, this doesn't work every time, but depending on who it is, you have an opportunity to ward off the angst by starting with, I really want to say something and I don't know how, can you help me?
Yeah.
All right, going to share these results with everybody.
So
44% led with race, followed by 23% not sure. A close next would be 20% with cultural background. And then the last two were very close, 6 and 7% gender and age.
So the reason I wanted to ask that is because what studies have shown is that when people see somebody, the things that they notice in order are the order of those questions. So the first thing people notice is race. The second thing they notice is cultural background, then gender, then age. And then all those other differences show up afterwards. And so if you look at how we react and what biases are showing, it's because the first thing we see is race. And 44% said that that's the thing that's most difficult for them to talk about. And yet it's the first thing we see.
Wait. So you say that all these people say they don't see color are lying?
Well, I don't think people, when they say they don't see color, are lying. And I'm actually going to have someone in 2 weeks at the end of June is going to join us for the whole conversation. But when we say I don't see color, what does that mean? So I want to save that. But I don't think people are lying. I think so many people are well-intentioned. I just don't know if they know how to express what they mean when they say I don't see color. Because I don't see color in and of itself, we know that's not true.
Right.
Well, you might be colorblind, but even then you can see color to a degree, so.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at so many things I want to say. So Autumn, you flagged some. I want to go down them in the order that they came in. Oh, I don't even know what that means anymore. Robert, you said people don't want to be in it because of what goes on in it. Can you please, I'm going to close that out. Can you please resubmit a question so I understand what you're asking? Eric, you're the person on the plane I would give knee space to as a 5 foot tall woman. Love your perspective. Oh, see, here you go.
I appreciate that because my knee gets banged a lot on those Southwest Airlines planes. My goodness.
Did your neighborhood ever make you, yeah, we're gonna have to go through these real quick. Did your neighborhood ever make you feel uncomfortable, Eric, that you were describing?
Yes.
Okay, that was short.
Do you want me to describe how, or?
You're welcome to just expand on that.
Well, I mean, I definitely noticed that there weren't very many people who look like us, and you know, I heard the N-word a lot in my neighborhood, but now the N-word's used in a different context. I guess I'm not quite sure why. And you know, in my neighborhood, I'll give a quick anecdote, kind of. You know, in high school, I came home one day and I said, Mom and Dad, there's not any black women for me to go out with. You know, there's hardly at the time, you know, Katy, Texas is more diverse today than it was when I grew up in the 80s and 90s. So for those of you who live in that area, it's not what it was growing up. It was a semi-rural town. And so my folks like, well, you're going to have to adapt and go out with the Caucasian ladies. So, well, what am I supposed to do when I ask them out? And then they're telling me their parents don't approve of them going out with someone that looks like me. It's like, what am I supposed to do? You know, that's kind of how it was for me.
Somebody's asking, what is it that I can do as a white person to support my sisters and brothers of color in this industry?
Okay. I guess one of the first things is I would ask is like, you know, do you even have friends of different races? Because I think one of the main problems that we have with this is that part of the problem we have in diversifying our workforce is that most of us live in homogeneous neighborhoods, particularly my white counterparts. Because let's be honest, most of the black neighborhoods are not safe. Most of us that are well-to-do don't like living in those neighborhoods, and for some of it's for real reasons. So my first question: are you friends with people of different ethnicities? And second, if not, I would say maybe you should go visit, you know, black churches, go volunteer. Like here in Austin, there's Jail to Jobs. A lot of those kids are Hispanic and black that come out of prison. They keep it a lot realer than I do. There's things they say I'm not even willing to say. And also, I would challenge you to, you know, read books. Like, for instance, Dr. King's legacy has been whitewashed, but if you really want to get an understanding of what's happening today, I would recommend you read his book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? Because not only does he address white America, he also talks about the things that black people aren't doing. Dr. King did say that black Americans as a big group, we've not paid the cost of injustice. We've not paid the cost to get justice, excuse me. We've not paid the full price, and it's still the way today, but you should read that book to say why. I don't want to speak for Dr. King on that, and that's a whole nother. But those are the kind of books I would read, not necessarily the whitewashed I Have a Dream speech that you see on TV.
I don't know that it's a whitewashed I Have a Dream speech, but I think what you mean by that is the context of that speech and the history leading into that speech and the way people, so the I Have a Dream speech in retrospect is this great thing. But as there was the lead up to that event was not positive and it was not welcomed. And it's only after the fact that the speech is great that all of a sudden we look back on it as this wonderful thing. And it is a great speech, but I think that's what you mean. So I wouldn't say that it was whitewashed. I also
it's whitewashed because they only played the first part of that speech, and not the rest of it. And I'm also friends with somebody that wrote a book with Dr. King and worked with him during that time. And so, you know, that camp, they've been upset about how he's portrayed because it ignores, you know, and by the way, somebody say I'm biased. You know, the federal government admitted they created an organization called COINTELPRO to harass Dr. King and Malcolm X and Huey Newton and Medgar Evers, et cetera, et cetera. So y'all can say I'm biased, but this country's admitted they did things to black people. Lyndon B. Johnson commissioned a study on racism in 1968 and said that this was that a lot of problems was based on white racism. This is what the government said in 1968, and they didn't expect to have much change today. So I'm just telling you, can go Google it. I've shown our host the article about that. These are things that the federal government themselves, whether you're Democrat or Republican, they've said these things.
And well, so I think part of what you're talking about is if we're going to have a conversation, if I'm understanding what you're saying, then let's have the whole conversation. And let's have an honest conversation, and let's look at the history behind the conversation. I think there's also another book popped into my mind, White Fragility. And that's a good book because that isn't about, hey, look at us black people, look at what we've been through, look at our history, but it's look at the difficulties of what people who aren't black might struggle with in order to have these conversations. Because I think there was a comment I read earlier, somebody said, I don't want to say something because I don't want to make somebody uncomfortable. And another person, I mean, we can't cover everything, but another person made a comment about how if I get uncomfortable, I recognize that's something I need to work on within me. So I think that's part of this as well.
I agree. Just like I had to talk to, my doctor talked to me the other day about my diet. That was very uncomfortable.
Well, that's true that you say that. No, not the diet part. What you say is that there are a lot of things that make us uncomfortable, but I think race makes us particularly uncomfortable. And in the industry that we work in, we are often the only one in the room, or one of a few in the room. And the only time that that's not the case is if we're at an event for African-American Black professionals. That is the time when you're surrounded by other people that look like you. That's been my professional experience my entire career. And I think so many people I've spoken with have that same experience. Have you? I
would agree with you. And, growing up, and even prior to that, I don't play basketball as much anymore, but that, or when I'm on the basketball court where I'll see more than just me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what I would invite everybody to do, not that I'm asking everyone to close their eyes, but whatever group you're in, so you're a man, I want you to imagine a room and it's all women, and you step into that room and you realize you're the only guy. There's going to be some thoughts that you have. If you're a woman and you step into a room and you realize you're the only woman, you're going to have some thoughts. When you're Black and you step into a room that is all white, your thoughts aren't going to be as shocking as others might think because this has been your experience. The shock or the strange sensation you're going to have is when you're Black and you walk into a room that's all Black. If I walked into a professional room and everybody in this meeting were Black, that would be the exception and not the rule.
Right.
So I would have more questions and thoughts going through my head in that example because it's not the standard. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Let's see. So, oh no, I don't. No, not that one. Sorry, now I'm scrolling through them. It may come across as biased depending on how the experience is presented or described. Oh, that's just a comment.
Okay.
So how can we break the mold? Barry's asking, and I think he might be talking about this pattern that we get stuck in. How do we break that?
You're going to have to make some changes in your personal life. I mean, that's where it starts, is outside the office. And then it's ultimately, who we're around is a reflection of our personal life. Right?
You said something earlier about that. I think I read a statistic. I could be wrong, but I think I read a statistic that said for most of us, regardless of ethnicity, race, most of the people in our group are 95% of the people in our group are like us. You said homogeneous, which means if I'm Black and I look around my network of, friends and family, it's probably 95% Black.
Yeah.
And if I'm white, it's probably 95% white. And I think one of the things to your point is go out and invite somebody to coffee who doesn't look like you.
Yeah.
That's a great first step. share stories, exchange experiences, because what we often find is that we have a lot more in common.
Yeah.
When we finally get to talking with each other. So I want to make sure we have time for the polls. You want to do the third one, Autumn?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do it.
Sure. Here is poll number 3 out of 4. Go ahead and cast your vote. Have you attending unconscious bias training? Yes, no, or prefer not to answer. And I'm doing my best to keep up with all the comments and questions. Yeah. It is flooding in, so I am doing my best to go through them for everyone.
And, I appreciate that. We do get a report of the questions that come in after that we don't get a chance to address. I would certainly invite folks. You have my email. It's at the end of the deck every time. You're welcome to reach out. Eric's contact information is there. We can't always respond, and you can catch us both on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. Messaging there is sometimes better than email.
All right. It looks like almost everyone has voted. We'll close this down. Sharing those results, 59% led with no, 35% with yes, 6% prefer not to answer.
So almost 60% of our audience has not attended unconscious bias training. And I wanted to ask that because you keep using the word bias, and I think people think bias is a bad word, but it's kind of the way the brain works.
Yeah.
Bias is just our brain's way of processing a lot of information instantaneously.
Right. I'm biased towards the University of Texas over Texas A&M when it comes to football here in the state.
Yeah, bias is what you're talking about, a preference. I prefer one thing over another. That's conscious. There's also unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is the woman who gets in the elevator and sees you and steps to the side. She's not even aware she's doing it because in her mind, she doesn't see color. But over the course of her lifetime, she's developed this idea, unconscious now, that you might be dangerous. So I'm gonna step away from you. And that's unconscious bias. And I think it's really great. For those of you who have done it, I applaud you. For those of you who haven't, I would encourage you, because understanding bias will take some of the stigma out of this, because there's a lot of stigma. All right, Eric. Oh, that's a long one. I can't get to that one. It'll take me the rest of the time. I would love to know Eric's perspective on this idea. As a white male, it seems like I don't have a lot to bring to the conversation. It isn't possible for me to add anything. Not that I don't want to have the conversation. I just don't know what my role is. Hopefully that makes sense.
I'm a little confused by it, wow.
So I think
the best way is maybe you can better explain what he's trying to say.
Yeah, so I think what he's trying to say is, at least the way I've heard it is, I'm a white guy and I'm not part of this conversation. But there's got to be something a white man can add to engage in the dialogue. So what would somebody like him need to do to be part of this conversation?
Well, I also think part of the conversation is that to my white colleagues, and I'm not trying to accuse them of doing this, but what do you do when you see a microaggression? Part of the conversation sometimes addressing people in your own community about their biases, especially if it's pretty obvious. How many times do we see, let's take the race thing for a second. How many men will see another man sexually harass a woman and say nothing, not even call him out? I like to know that because I know it happens a lot.
That's what's interesting, is because when it comes to microaggressions, and so for those who don't know, a microaggression is a subtle, sometimes unconscious comment that somebody makes that disparages a person or an ethnicity or a race. It's usually an underrepresented minority. And it's the example of, it's usually a comment like, "You're so articulate." Or somebody looks at somebody and judges them based on their age.
Or you speak white. I've heard that a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I've been willing to say, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, exactly. And so what happens with the microaggression is you see it, you aren't the victim or the perpetrator, but you don't know what to say.
Right.
So, I mean, there's three sides to microaggressions, and it's hard. But I think, to your point, learn to be an ally is what you're saying. And
Yes.
so you speak up for somebody who is not a member of your group. You're a man, speak up on behalf of women. You're African American, speak up on behalf of somebody who's Asian. If you're Asian, speak up on behalf of somebody who's white if you see that they're being trashed.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all have the equal opportunity here to help the other brother out, or the other person. I don't say brother as in black. or male. Sorry, I shouldn't have said that. The other person. I think that's what you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah,
I've had to do that. I paid the price, but I'm willing to pay for it because I won't be able to sleep well at night. So I've fired a black client for blaming white people for his lack of financial success. But the truth was he was lazy and not willing to put in the work. And he's saying, oh, these white people, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and the crazy thing, he was married to a white lady. I was just like, what? And I had to tell him, dude, you're always partying and posting pictures next to cars that aren't yours. Maybe you should think about that.
it's funny. You have some very specific examples. Somebody asked, what's the best course of action for someone who's working in corporate America? Something they could take if they witness racism, something they could do, an action that they could take.
Wow, that's going to depend on the situation. I mean, now, I know that some companies actually have a policy that if you witness racism, you're supposed to report or you could be terminated. Funny thing, I did that and I got terminated. Not the person actually did it. But I would say also proceed cautiously. But if you do speak up, I do know white people who've lost their jobs to speak up as well. So the question I'm going to ask you, I would ask, if you're willing to speak up, are you willing to pay the price for that? Because a lot of people, even black people, are not willing to pay the price for speaking up because we don't have that abundance mindset. So are you willing to pay the price speaking up? Because that's something that you have to decide. Because for some people, they can't afford to miss a paycheck. Some people just don't want to deal with the discomfort, but you should speak up.
Well, but I would say it's easier said than done.
Right.
Because
that's what I said. That's why I'm asking. Are you willing to pay the price? Because I've paid the price, and it wasn't even about me. I paid the price.
So I'm thinking about that personally. Like, how am I feeling as you say that? And I'm thinking, is it a question of willing? At the end of the day, maybe it is about willing, but I think part of it is that you have to take calculated risks. Mm-hmm. I can't be your ally if I'm kicked out of the group as well. I have to figure out, would I be better swallowing this today so that I can continue to be part of the group to try to affect change from the inside? Or there's the difference between your workplace says you need to report it. It's our policy. But the practice is, if you report it, you're going to be blackballed.
Right.
So there's a difference between practice and policy. Those are called unwritten rules. And there are a lot of those in organizations. It doesn't matter what they say. This is what's going to happen to you if you do it.
Right.
So I don't know. It's hard to say, simply a question of willing. I'm grateful for this conversation. I love this profession. But it is an old white guy in an old white boys club. I'm going to guess that the person who said that is not a old white guy. I'm excited to have an impact on the diversity and inclusion while I'm in this profession and for future generations. Thank you for that comment.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm just trying to see. There's so many questions. I want to go down to when the comment is made, my people, isn't that being exclusionary rather than exclusionary, not inclusionary? Good question.
Well, go to my firm page. When I talk about people, one of my closest friends is Trevor's a white dude. We make some jokes about that. So when I talk about my people, I'm also talking about my team. That's me.
Actually, I'll make a plug for you. You didn't ask me to do this, but if you all go to Eric's website, and again, there's a link on it. There's a really nice letter that you put on your website. I would encourage everybody to read it because I think in webinars like this, we really only have, between polling questions and introductions, we really only have about 35, 40 minutes to have a whole lot of conversation. This is just one sliver, a small piece of the pie. But you really do stand for a lot more. I like the idea of us debating some of these things.
Yeah.
But I would invite people to go to visit your website and look at that letter that you wrote. I think it's really nicely done.
And I want to say, to be honest, I was actually reluctant of publishing that letter, but my chief operating officer, Kirsty Conway, told me to do it. And I was nervous about it because even though I'm not afraid speaking up, I also don't like dealing with some things. And I did get some hate emails for that, but in the grand scheme of things, it was worth it. When I did a podcast with Kelly Phillips Herb, Tax Girl, shout out Tax Girl, Tax Twitter, she did research. She said I was one of very few accounting firms that actually wrote something like that. So even bigger firms didn't say it. And then when I had a conversation with a well-known CPA that's a coach, one thing she told me about why most firms don't have it is that they're too busy. And I said, no, the truth is that you have been threatened financially. You haven't had enough clients that demand you to make that statement. I know somebody that's not a CPA that wrote an article about diversity and inclusion who's African-American woman. And we went to her firm page, there's no mention of diversity. And so it's so sensitive. Even people in our industry speak about it. Most of them won't even put it on their website, and they're paid speakers and won't do it because they don't want to deal with what we deal with.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so I'm looking at the clock. We got to ask the last polling question, and I got one more comment. So let's throw that one out there, Autumn.
All right, fourth poll is up. Go ahead with that comment.
So, well, I think the other reason that people don't put that out there, Eric, is because, especially in public accounting, we want to stay as safe as possible. If we think something is going to be provocative, let's just not say it. And it doesn't just have to be a question of race. It could be a question of a position that we should or shouldn't be taken on a tax return, or some new strategy for advisory services. If we worry that there's going to be a ripple effect through our client base, let's just not say it.
I don't have the luxury of being safe. I stand out and invoke a lot of reaction just by my appearance, period. I've never had that luxury. I would like to know what that's like sometime.
I think we have like 10 more seconds before this closes. So I'm going to throw out a comment by one of our participants and says that this person answered race to that previous question, but said, maybe it's really gender. As a gay man, I think sometimes it's not always appreciated for a gay man to stand up for women's rights. So thank you for sharing that comment. That's fair. And this is where it gets complicated because some of us fit into multiple diversity categories.
Yeah.
So let's see. In the 46% said that they are part of the majority in their firm or company. 35% part of the minority group. 2%, 12% that they're not sure. And then we had 7% not answer. And so I think that's a wonderful mix because this conversation isn't just for the minority. This conversation is also the person who's in the majority. And notice I didn't say white in that question because depending on your firm, the majority might not be white. And if somebody thought here I meant white versus color, that's also an indication of our bias. Well, I know we're out of time. We could have talked about this for 3 more hours. I know I'm going to be joining you on your podcast. I'm launching a podcast. I'm going to invite you to be on mine so that we can continue this conversation. Thank you so much for being willing to say some crazy things today, because I think it's important for us to show you can have crazy talk and still make and still demonstrate that you're trying to get to a solution.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, told you I'm biased.
Oh, Lord. Autumn, you need to close off his mic. You need to cut the man off. Wrap us up. Take us home.
I will. What a great discussion. And Jina, we did have some people asking how often you have these diversity and inclusion webinars. Would you like to talk about that briefly?
Yeah, and I will show you. The next one is on Friday, June 11. We'll be talking about equitable policies. These are every other Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 1 hour. I invite a series of different guests to come in. We talk about one thing, and just like I did today with Eric, we talked about how uncomfortable we need to get. So thank you for asking, and I hope you all can join us every other Friday at 3.
Thank you so much to both of you. We appreciate having you with us. And with that, we have come to the conclusion of today's webinar. We here at CPA Academy will process your credit later today. That, along with a copy of this webinar and handouts, will be available in your CPA Academy accounts within 24 hours. And if you look in your email inbox right now, you will find the evaluation link for this webinar. As she mentioned, all questions asked today will be forwarded in a report to the presenters. Thanks again, Eric and Jina, for your great content, and to our members for your participation. Please check the schedule on our website for additional information, and we hope to see you on a future webinar. Have a great day, everyone.